If you grew up in the 90s and 2000s especially, you may have watched the light of Mitsubishi's legacy fade away before your very eyes. Currently more well known for their consumer electronics and generic SUVs, the company has a history of famously competitive performance vehicles. Mainly, the fabled Lancer Evolution and its 10 generations of all-wheel drive sports sedan performance, with rally pedigree to back it up. The STI vs Evo war gripped enthusiasts for decades of motorsport, with the rivalry beginning in the early 90s. 4 driven wheels, 4 cylinders, 4 doors, 1 turbo, and a big wing. Despite the popularity of the Evo, the company has produced other vehicles of interest. Some that never quite made it to market, and others you may not have heard of altogether. Let's take a look. Number 1, the Mitsubishi SST concept, 1998. Let's get this obscure one out of the way first. Visually the predecessor to the 3G Eclipse, the SST was reportedly the vision of the 21st century sports car styling, according to Mitsubishi themselves. The 3G Eclipse has some of the most polarizing opinions, being seen as no more than a failed Chrysler letdown with removal of the all-wheel drive turbo option, but to others is a viable build foundation for those who want to build something different. With the sheer amount of shared drivetrain components from the Evo and 2G, the world is your oyster. But that's a topic for another time. Regardless of the opinions of the current day results that made it to production, the company had high hopes from the start. With exotic vehicle bodily proportions, a sleek roofline like that of a later Porsche 918, and high radius arches to house larger wheels, it's safe to say they were not too far off. According to the manufacturer, the SST was slated as a study for a sporty model that Mitsubishi Motors was developing in order to maintain and build on the popularity of the current Eclipse and GTO models, the GTO being the 3000 GT in the States. Despite its mid-engine appearance, the vehicle remained front-engine, front-wheel drive, sporting a 2-liter turbocharged engine cranking out about 210 horsepower. Surely, the tuning potential would have been regarded as limitless, considering the output of the same 2-liter turbo 4G63 in the Lancer Evo. This turbocharged platform, along with its bodily proportions, definitely could have had customers thinking that an Eclipse GSX or VR4 was again on the horizon. Another all-wheel drive turbo 2-door for the masses. That unfortunately has never been seen again from the factory. Truthfully, not much has changed in the production model, besides exchanging the exotic styling for more engineering-focused and accurate proportions and drive equipment. Shedding the 20 by 8.5 inch NK wheels wrapped in two 45 40/20s and larger brakes for 17 inch wheels or 16 inch standard, with smaller brakes and a more daily drive size tire of 205 55/16. The awkwardly bubbly and exaggerated fender flares were subdued, and the functional vents were left as a styling cue of the appearance of functional aero, leaving the door ribs instead of 3 lines carried down the length of the car for design fluidity. These changes were more naturally suited for the power output and actual purpose of the vehicle in the market, as a passenger vehicle with sporty aspirations, but still lacking in follow-through. Especially considering the price point of the car though, it all checks out. With the addition of the 3-liter V6 options in the GT and GTS trims, the power output managed to at least match that of the concept, but left enthusiasts wanting more feasible tuning potential to push it further ahead. The SST will be left as a fair vision for the future, but a letdown of the reality of what could have been. Number 2, the 3000 GT VR4 Spider, 1995 to 1997. Marketed in the Japanese domestic market as the GTO and the 3000 GT globally, the 3K GT was a luxury sports car ahead of its time with technology surpassing its competitors, with impressive performance figures to back it up.
Only one was awarded Motor Trend Import Car of the Year, the Mitsubishi 3000 GT, with all-wheel drive, all-wheel steering, ABS brakes, and 300 horsepower. The Mitsubishi 3000 GT, Import Car of the Year. Mitsubishi, the word is getting around.
A top-trim 3000 GT offered all-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, active aero, and 320 horsepower from a twin-turbocharged 3-liter V6. Set to compete with the likes of the Mazda RX-7, Nissan 300ZX, Honda NSX, Subaru SVX, and the Toyota Supra, this Grand Tourer was on the path to success and even ended up offering something no other of its competitors brought to the table: a convertible hardtop. This is not a performance benefit. If anything, the contrary, but matched the entire Grand Touring experience MO that Mitsu was clearly aiming for. For the 1993 model year, the new variant was added, with a retractable hardtop engineered and converted from the coupe models by American Specialty Co., known as ASC or American Sunroof Company in California.
This vehicle comes from Japan, specially ordered. In Japan, it is produced with other 3000 GT models. However, there's some unique features. One is it has additional structural rigidity in the A-pillar sections. There's no wiring past the firewall. Comes without a hatch, has a plastic cover, different spring rates, and minus a significant amount of trim.
This would be one of the first retractable hardtops brought to the market, with power automation, behind only the 1935 Peugeot 402 Eclipse D-compatible and the 1957 Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner, both clearly ahead of their time.
The world's only hideaway hardtop.
Vastly different than the T-tops and removable hardtops of the era, this arrangement allowed for fully automated removal and stowaway of the roof, leaving only an elevated rear section behind the driver and passenger section of the cabin.
This is zone one, where the conversion from coupe to convertible really starts to take place. What happens here is the top is removed and all the conversions for the structural rigidity factors are put back in. Similar to how you need a strong foundation for a house, this is where that takes place.
And a strong foundation it is. The car is carefully masked and padded to avoid any repainting of the body. Doors and fenders are removed and major reinforcement panels are installed. Particularly important are the massive box rail sections welded beneath the doors.
Not to mention all that this vehicle had to offer with its strange roof situation set aside. The VR4 variant of the 3000 GT truly meant something when it came to performance and driver experience. Truthfully, that trim difference left the car in a different league compared to the base or SL models. The VR4 came with all-wheel drive over front-wheel drive, a 6-speed manual over 5-speed from the year 94 onwards, 4-wheel steering, and active aerodynamics in the form of a power-adjustable front lip and rear spoiler into the year 1996. A car this feature-rich and unique had many variants, improvements, and features added or removed over its 3 generations, including limited-run color options. I've grown particularly fond of the Martinique Yellow Pearl. This buttery paint job had such a limited production. Admittedly, it's not for everyone. All of this making a properly spec'd VR4 an absolute gem to acquire. The 3000 GT has other special editions besides the VR4 Spider, such as the GTO MR in Japan and the Beckenbauer edition limited to only 30 units produced. But that's too much information to cover today without its own episode. As for the VR4 Spider, 1,618 were slated to be produced when brought over from Japan, but it is claimed that a mere 1,034 were ever completed and made available for sale. The remaining ones assumed to have been dismantled for parts, making this specifically one of the most uncommon sports cars in the world.
And so after about 12 and a half hours of cutting, welding, and numerous quality control checks, this Spider is finally ready to leave the web.
Number 3. The Mitsubishi FTO, 1994 to 2000. The icon that never was and just couldn't be. Ending its production run at the start of the millennium, the FTO closed the lid on what would become a bygone era of compact Japanese sports coupes of the 90s. With that in mind, it is truly noteworthy how forgotten or completely unheard of it is, albeit with some valid reasons. The FTO was regarded as the little brother of the Mitsubishi GTO, that Americans know as the 3000 GT, but it never made it to the States. This 4 or 6-cylinder model, offered only in front-wheel drive, made far less power and was surely not something to write home about when considering its performance metrics. Available with a 115 horsepower, 1.8 single overhead cam 4-cylinder, and 6-cylinder dual overhead cam and newer variant with Myvec, producing 177 and 197 horsepower respectively. The V6 models topped out at 7,500 RPM and hit peak torque late in the rev range, leading to at least some spirited driving if desired. Of course, with only enough power to get out of its own way. The FTO abbreviation stood to mean Fresco Turismo Omologato, and a fine display of Japanese Italian, literally translating to fresh, touring, homologated. Interesting, to say the least. The FTO nomenclature originated from the Galant FTO, produced from 1971 to 75. This was the performance coupe variant from a now bygone era, sporting rear-wheel drive and limited power figures with matching limitations to its success in the car market. With its less competitive power figure and drivetrain, it's no surprise it never paved its way to a memorable legacy with enthusiasts, despite its stylish appearance that looks rather timeless to my eyes. Being lesser known and considered undesirable makes it a bargain for those interested in something different. Now that it's passing the 25-year mark, it can be cleared for import and registration in the US of A, if you can find a worthy chassis that has not yet succumbed to the sands of time. The FTO had one last hurrah in 1999 that would be off the radar to most. December 20th, 1999, Tokyo. Mitsubishi Motors Corporation announces that a Mitsubishi electric vehicle model became the first anywhere to cover 2,000 kilometers in 24 hours. The Mitsubishi FTO EV prototype utilized manganese lithium-ion battery packs to complete 899 laps over the 2.4-kilometer track at the Mitsubishi Motors Car Research and Development Center Proving Ground, to cover a total distance of 2,142.3 kilometers in the 24 hours between 8 a.m. December 19th and 8 a.m. December 20th. The previous record had unofficially been set by a Saturn EV reaching only 1,700 kilometers in a day. I think this goes to show you how much research and development goes on behind the scenes to create automotive legends of today, but also how much engineering effort flies under the radar, regardless of how impactful it may have been for technological advancement. The FTO may not be on posters of kids' bedroom walls, but it was here, and it accomplished all that it intended and needed to. Number 4, the Mitsubishi Starion, 1983 to 1989. Surely one of the most forgotten vehicles of any car company's sports car heritage, the Starion was a necessary step in the evolution of basic technological development and passed the baton in the relay race that has become the modern Japanese sports car. Beginning development in the late 1970s, the Starion was set to compete with the likes of the Toyota Celica and Nissan Silvia. In due time, its most notable and more comparable rivals would come to be the Toyota Supra and Nissan 300ZX. This coupe may not have brought any blistering performance specs to the table, but surely had the right formula going, with a 4-cylinder turbo, rear-wheel drive, and 2-door body. The Starion name was rumored to have come from a Japanese mispronunciation of stallion, considering the lack of L consonant sound in the Japanese language. But it's actually a contraction of star and the mythical horse Arion. The Colt and original Eclipse were apparently also named on a horse theme. The cover of the original 1984 sales brochure specifically says, "The name Starion, derived from the combination of star and Arion, Hercules' horse in Greek mythology, symbolizes a sense of the universe, and of power and high performance." A little grandiose, don't you think? The connotation of horses in model names is widespread throughout the automotive industry. Despite having this meaning, the chassis also went by another name. Due to gray market tactics, the Starion was also sold as the Dodge Conquest. Bearing little differences, the sister cars simply wore the badges, filling an empty sports car slot in the Plymouth Dodge lineup, much like the Mitsubishi 3000 GT and Dodge Stealth to come later. Or more familiarly, like the 86 chassis for the FRS, BRZ, and GT86, all being the same car with different brand identity. The Starion came to the market offering 2 engine configurations, but always a 4-cylinder turbo and rear-wheel drive. The 2 options being a 2.0 and 2.6 liter, producing 145 horsepower, 155 pound-feet of torque, and 170 horsepower, 201 pound-feet, respectively. These were offered with a 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic. Nothing pushing you into your seat, but on par for the era with room to go for tuning. All of this came with modern mechanical amenities we've grown to expect, but were boxes checked considering its 80s release. This included disc brakes, independent front and rear suspension, electronic fuel injection, and of course, beloved pop-up headlights. 2 body variations came about for the Starion in the form of both a narrow and wide body version. The narrow body complied with Japanese vehicle proportions rulings to avoid added taxation after passing certain bodily dimensions on the streets. Available after the 1986 model year, the wide body variant had wider box-style fenders, reminiscent of rally fenders of many other models, and was 50 millimeters wider, but not just in bodily proportions. Details are difficult to come by and confirm, but the control arms front and rear are supposedly longer on the wide body models, truly justifying the difference, not just for a bit more tire clearance and road presence. The The styling cues were curiously comparable to the Porsche 924, but also on par for the course considering the design of rivals. This smoothed wedge shape with aggressive geometry stands out when comparing to today's design language, which became far more consistent and subdued. Although it's beginning to hit a turning point again as we move toward the mid-20s yet again. Sounds strange when you put it that way. So now if you're fortunate enough to see one of these come out of the woodwork at your local Cars and Coffee, you'll be one of the few who actually knows what they're looking at. The way I see it, the Starion was a mere stepping stone that led to the next stage. It took the best of what it had from the time it was produced to pave the way for the next run of vehicles, which would then become the cars that we will truly remember as great. And with the return of boxy styling combined with modern aerodynamics, maybe we can see a resurgence of cars that at least look this way again, be it with some present-day trade-offs, of course. Number 5. Pajero Evolution, 1997 to 1999. You thought the only Evos dripping through the dirt were Lancers? Enter the Mitsubishi Pajero. Arguably the company's most capable vehicle ever, this Evo was the vastly enhanced top trim of their late 80s, early 90s compact SUV. Debuting in 1997 for just a 3-year model run, only 2,500 road-going examples of this special edition were ever produced. For homologation purposes and its compliance with race regulations, allowing its performance in the Paris-Dakar Rally Series, though it is speculated to be slightly higher at just over 2,600 models produced. This coveted Dakar Rally race spanned from Paris, France to Dakar, Senegal, hence the name of the event. This 2-week, over 12,000 kilometer journey across the Sahara and North Africa is a true test of off-road prowess and longevity, for both the vehicle and drivers involved. Mitsubishi entered the rally raid for the first time in 1983 as a perfect way to showcase their new model released the year prior, to compete with Toyota's now legendary Land Cruiser. Defying the expectations of rivals, the new entry of the original Pajero would take the win for the non-modified class that year and the next, going on to win 12 Dakar rallies over the next 2 decades, with a record 150 incremental stage wins. The long history between Mitsubishi and the Dakar Rally poised the manufacturer for the next generation competition rally car with the new millennium on the approach. The pressure was on, but the new vehicle needed to be based on a current production car for homologation purposes, and a road-legal version needed to be offered for sale to the general public. To homologate something simply means to express agreement or approval of, which in this case is the agreed-upon parameters for a vehicle to have entry in a race series. Designated as the Pajero Evolution, for obvious reasons, the new and improved vehicle was based on the unibody shell of the second-generation Pajero. However, it was vastly modified, with new suspension, a wider body kit, skid plates, aero, mud flaps, and power courtesy of a 6G74, a 3.5-liter dual overhead cam engine with MyVec, Mitsubishi's variable valve timing technology, and dual intakes producing 275 horsepower. This is suspiciously close to the gentleman's agreement that began in 1989 in Japan, where those involved agreed, at least on paper, to limit their advertised horsepower ratings to 276 brake horsepower. Considering this agreement was slowly disbanded in the early 2000s, perhaps on a real-world dyno more power can be produced than originally stated. Inside you'll find more strongly bolstered Recaro racing seats, designed to keep the driver and front passenger in place even when they're taking on the dunes of the northern African Sahara. Arguably the best 4x4 of all time, this one is often forgotten or unheard of entirely, likely due to low production numbers, much like the rest of this list. With a trophy case as full as it is, it'd be nice to see something so purpose-built again from the company. But with the way things are looking, it wouldn't surprise me to see Mitsubishi Motors fade away, with its last breath unfortunately being an EV desperately aimed as the last attempt to make profit and grasp one final period of relevancy in the car market. But I would enjoy being proven wrong in this case. Before we call it, here's some honorable mentions that didn't make the cut, or were too obscure or specific to include. The Eclipse 4G Rally Art Concept, 2006. The 4th generation Eclipse could have been the saving grace that made up for the 3G's shortcomings. Instead, aside from a more powerful V6, the 4th generation Eclipse let the model name go out with yet another disappointed whimper. It was only offered as a front-wheel drive platform with no turbocharged option available. And no, we're not even going to talk about the Eclipse Cross. The 6G75M truthfully makes good power and has become a common engine swap candidate for many 3G owners, but the rest of the vehicle left so much to be desired. With the performance set aside, the aesthetics of this car became increasingly and cartoonishly bubbly, and the rear end appeared like that of an obese bumblebee.
Introducing the all-new 2006 Mitsubishi Eclipse. Available 6-speed, 263-horse Myvec V6. Driven to thrill.
Instead of the 3.8-liter NA V6, the car featured the coveted 4G 63T engine. The 2-liter inline-4 was taken from the Lancer Evo 8 MR. In addition to the twin-scroll turbocharger which it already had, the engine was enhanced with HKS components, including an air intake and new camshafts. And of course, more importantly, power went to all 4 wheels through the Lancer Evo all-wheel drive system, and a 6-speed manual with a triple-plate carbon fiber clutch. Now that's what we're talking about. All of that in mind, the Eclipse Rally Art featured a lot of carbon fiber body panels, believe it or not, including the side mirrors, hood, front and rear fascia, roof, and fenders. Considering this, we can safely assume that the Rally Art concept would have been lighter than the original, despite all the different components, also including the larger full Brembo brake package. The styling was changed, and admittedly was slightly better, and even had wider fender arches. The interior, of course, had the full Evo treatment, with Alcantara, Recaro parts, and everything else you'd expect. Despite the glory of this concept, the vehicle was never produced. But we can dream. The Eclipse 3G EV prototype. Details unknown. Mitsubishi was early to the game with their EVs, and information on this one is very hard to come by. Most people will never have seen or heard of this one in particular. Perhaps with more deep digging and research, more could be said here. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new about something you may not have heard of before. If you like these kind of history-related videos, definitely let me know down in the comments. I'd be interested in making some more. Either way, until next time. Bye guys.